Hi everyone, welcome to Salvo Fest and thanks for joining us. I'm Faith and Salvo and today I'm introducing you to Gareth Maeer, who is the co-founder and director of Raybel Charters Community Interest Company. They're involved in an amazing and rather visionary community engagement project which is based in Sittingbourne, Kent. So Raybel are also part of the Sail Cargo Alliance, which are a growing network of organisations which include sailboats and share a passion for ship sail cargo. The Alliance supports small-scale global farmers who are impacted by global warming, and by working together with shared ethics, they create a healthy transport culture that promotes the preservation of the environment. So without further ado, I shall introduce you to Gareth. How are you doing, Gareth?
Hey, hello, Faye. Hi, great. Thanks very much. Yeah, good to see you.
So how did Raybel come about?
Quite well, sort of by it's just one of those things where you grab something when it comes along. Really, it wasn't planned. It wasn't something I sort of searched out. I had a friend, Rob, who was a mate because he does up vintage bikes, restores bicycles. And one day he sort of said, well, I was wondering, it seemed to be something on his mind. And I said, well, what is it? What's going on? I said, well, I bought this barge, this Thames Sailing barge. I'm sort of wondering what to do with it. And it needs some restoration work. I thought, oh my goodness, that's a bit of a job. And I think he knew that I had this sort of employment and background in funding. And nothing sort of much happened immediately, but I went away and had a bit of a think about it and thought, well, yeah, there could be some way. The Heritage Lottery funders did put money into a number of Thames barge restorations, so maybe they would do another one. And meanwhile, separately to that, through another friend, we got sort of introduced to this sail cargo idea and this sort of emerging movement of sail cargo through a friend who by this time was living in Cornwall and had become involved in the first transport of rum and stuff on the Tres Hombres coming from Caribbean into Falmouth. So it's joy. My wife had said, well, why don't we put the two together so we could sort of combine this idea of the sail cargo venture with the barge restoration. Maybe the barge could become part of the network, the sail cargo network, bringing these sail ship goods into London and along the Thames and linking up with the ship or the ships which bring stuff across the ocean and the seas. So yeah, that was like, oh yeah, maybe there's something there. That would be fantastic. It'd be amazing if we could do something like that. And we got in touch with the sail cargo people, Alex Gelden, who said, well, that's this is lucky timing that we're about to have a meeting in Brittany, in Douarnenez. So Rob and I sort of trekked off down to Douarnenez, had this most amazing sort of 3 days with all of these sailors and these sort of like visionaries about how they were going to bring sail shipping back again, and it sort of seemed, it's dreamy but real at the same time. And so we just felt completely inspired by this and thought we could do it. So I got a train back to London and went in the next day and quit my job.
What a story. That sounds brilliant. So yes, I mean, talk us a little bit more about the Sail Cargo Alliance and how that works. And obviously you've discussed around the kind of estuary. Is there any sort of extended network that you work with as well with regards to the various boats that you use? How does it work?
So I guess the thing I really like about it is that it's very organic and it just sort of happens by all of us sort of being involved in our own endeavors, and they're all different. And it might be, there's some French guys who own the ship, the Blue Schooner Company, who own the Gallant, which is the ship which goes across the Atlantic for us and goes to Colombia and places in the Caribbean. Or it may be somebody who's finding the producers, which is more Alex's role these days, the producers that we would like to work with and the farmers. And it's the farmers themselves. And it's the people who are doing some distribution and building up networks of friends and supporters who want to buy this stuff when it arrives in different ports in England, but also, you know, remembering that things go to Amsterdam and they go to France, and now they're going to Ireland as well.
Amazing. So tell me more a little bit about the sort of Raybel project. I know a multifaceted project, so could you just tell me a little bit more about the different strands to Raybel Charters? Obviously, sail cargo being very large area of that as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're all sort of parallel tracks at the moment. So this idea that we had that we could put Raybel into the sail cargo network is still out there. It's still something we'd like to do, but Raybel was and remains a sailing barge that needs work to be restored in order to bring it into sailing condition, so it can sort of start to do that sail cargo role. So that's a little bit sort of out in the future for Raybel. But we put together the idea of the application of a funded project which would create as much sort of like community benefit as we could through that work taking place, through the fixing up of the barge and the restoration work of the barge. And really the sort of the thing that's really made that work, and the sort of secret ingredient, if you like, there, which pulled that project together, was realizing that we had to find a base for the work to take place. Originally, we didn't really have a clear idea about where that was going to be. So Raybel was on mud in Essex, not moving, not going anywhere. We could have done it there. There weren't really great facilities to do a restoration project there. There are, in some other parts of the East Coast, there are good facilities, so that was an option. We could have come down to Kent, gone to Faversham, where there's still a working boatyard. We've even came up, you know, we thought about maybe we could do it in London. That would be a sort of a new thing, doing a barge restoration, finding an old dock or wharf where we could work with there. And none of those sort of really quite came together. So the sort of like the magical moment was when we came to Sittingbourne. Even in Sittingbourne, and there's a creek which comes into the town here, which used to be sort of full of boatyards and do loads of sort of barge building and barge maintenance, almost all of which physically is now completely gone. It's all been just demolished, basically. There's no physical remnants of it to speak of whatsoever. We could do it there. And we went and had a talk to the council. We said, well, we've got this, we've actually sort of just opened up this bit of the creek at the very head of the creek, which is an old wharf. It's called Lloyd's Wharf. And we've got an idea that we could sort of turn this into a bit of a sort of a new leisure heritage destination for the town, which when we went to look at it, you know, it requires a little bit of sort of flight of imagination to think of it in that way, because it's still quite a sort of industrial area. There's a big retail park just above us, but it's sort of like, you know, it was just again one of those things that you just thought, oh yeah, there's something we could do here, something quite sort of transformational that we could do here. And then, of course, what I haven't said so far is that Raybel was built here. Raybel was built in Sittingbourne. Raybel was made and launched at Milton Creek. So we were basically bringing Raybel home. So we were bringing the barge back to Milton Creek and sort of rejoining it to the community here. And that sort of like, yeah, that was the sort of piece which made everything work, because it was a way of sort of like returning and reclaiming and revisioning that heritage which the town had, was still sort of proud of, but sort of knew it had lost, really. And so we can use the projects to do something much bigger in terms of urban regeneration, of thinking about and going back to the heritage of what was here and imagining how it can be appropriate and used for what this town sort of becomes in the future.
Yeah, sounds fantastic. And in terms of the kind of community work that you're involved with the project, how has that been?
We're really starting from from zero. It's a, you know, these projects generally, you know, people are encouraged to sort of think about them in terms of where they live and their place and their community and their links, which we don't have. You know, we're not from, none of us that were originally involved in setting it up are from Sittingbourne. It's Raybel that's from Sittingbourne. So we had to sort of like really build from nothing, just sort of like going out and getting, first of all, really very much on the local authority side, who were amazingly supportive, I think, because, you know, they could see what a difference and transformation they could create by having the project happen. And then sort of gradually getting to know the local community groups and raising our profile, doing regular slots on the local radio station, you know, all of that type of stuff, just getting some publicity going. And then I guess there were really sort of two main strands to it. One was setting up a volunteer program, which was, you know, it was very attractive to guys who had spent their working life with their hands and wanted to sort of carry on doing that. That's mostly sort of who we have sort of involved in that, and they're here a couple of times a week. And the other thing was thinking creatively about some sort of heritage activities that we could run. And then, so sort of the work that you've done, Faye, sort of around artistic creation and workshops and using natural materials and some of sort of the reuse ideas. And then that brings in a sort of a different sort of, you know, different people who are interested in things other than bashing bits of wood, you know, to sort of remake a barge. So it's the idea of sort of having this sort of breadth of offer, if you like, of different things that will engage people and bring them down to the wharf, and then maybe sort of spread the word about it.
I also think what was amazing with the fact that we almost connected the Caribbean to Sittingbourne as well, with some of the cargo that we've transported, and how that's kind of passed down through different vessels that we've used as well. So did you want to sort of go into a little bit more detail about the voyages last year and the small boat that went up Milton Creek as well?
Yeah, well, last year was fantastic year for the. It's the first year, I suppose, we really felt like we made the whole sort of that vision we had of the sail cargo journey going into London really, and the Thames really sort of like come off, you know. And we dreamt about that sort of 4 years ago, making that happen, and we sort of did last year. So it was really, really rewarding. And the way that worked was that. So the Gallant, which I've mentioned, was the ship which comes across the Atlantic, and they arrived at, they came all the way into St. Catherine docks, so right into the centre of London in July, and they had this cargo of the things which they brought from Colombia, coffee, sugar. We had some, you know, chocolate on board from that journey as well, plus the things from Portugal, so olive oil, wine. We sort of ventured into sort of more staples like products, so beans and chickpeas, those sorts of things as well. So a whole sort of hold full of these different exciting products. And we did an event at St. Catherine docks, and people who'd ordered in advance were able to sort of come down and take away what they'd bought, what they'd ordered, you know, and so be part of that, be part of the arrival. And then afterwards, we thought we'd have a go. Let's sort of see if we can take some cargo all the way to Sittingbourne, all the way up Milton Creek, which was quite a sort of operation of working with some different scales of vessels. So the Gallant went to the Isle of Sheppey, and there it met another Thames Sailing barge called the Dawn. The Dawn sailed around as far as it could on Milton Creek until there's a bridge here, which was put in 15 years ago to service the supermarket, and that has sort of restricted navigation on the creek. With the Thames Sailing barge, you can put the mast down and go underneath it, so that's how we got Raybel here. But with the Dawn, they sort of went up as far as they could to it, and then they sort of put the products into their little like a little barge boat, a sort of dinghy thing with a small sail, and that was small enough to sort of just go underneath the bridge, and came all the way up to the top of the creek, just as the sun was setting, and unloaded this stuff onto the wharf side, some olive oil and some some wine. I think we had some honey, olives, different things. So we thought that was probably the first time that there'd been a cargo delivery to Sittingbourne docks in 80 years, maybe, I guess, something like that. Yeah. The wharf before would have been used as a very different type of cargo. It was mainly used to serve the local paper mill, which is one of the biggest local employers. So it would have been bringing in pulp, and they use this stuff called esparto grass in the production process, and China clay. So, but it was, it was an international trade that was coming from Algeria and Spain, as well as the China clay from down probably in Cornwall, actually. And all of that being unloaded at this wharf, used in the production process for the newsprint, and then the newsprint brought back to the wharf and being taken up to London to Fleet Street for the newspaper printing.
It's so fascinating, just that history behind, or it's kind of history repeating itself now, really, isn't it, with what we're doing. Yeah, it's incredible. So in terms of the sort of going along the ethos of what sort of the project's achieving, and maybe relating that to reuse and reclamation, what elements have you, or what materials have you been reusing within the project? I'm guessing through that the restoration of Raybel, but also the kind of wider scope of the regeneration of Lloyd's Wharf as well.
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously the biggest reuse item in the whole of the project is Raybel. So we're sort of bringing Raybel back into use, or reusing Raybel, which is a bit more than just sort of, that sounds a bit glib, but it's a bit more than that in terms of thinking. Raybel's not been not in bad condition, and a lot of it is still original. And given that these barges were really, probably when they were building, they probably thought they had a 30-year life, and then you just build another one. So here we are trying to restore one which was built in 1920. So we're restoring a barge which is 100 years old, and wasn't really designed to last for 100 years. But they built them well. Raybel's a combination of an iron frame with a timber hull and deck, and it's still, much of it is in good condition. So the task and the sort of incredible sort of skill of the shipwright team that we've now got working on the project 5 days a week is to sort of like figure out how much of this is worth sort of holding and keeping, and combining it and sort of very sort of intricately putting in these new bits of the timber to repair and re-strengthen the barge. Most of the work there happening in the bow, which is the bit which sort of got bashed about quite a bit during Raybel's years of trade. So there's a sort of like a reuse element to all of that work. In a way, it sort of would be simpler just to sort of like go to the front of the barge, go big chainsaw, just lop the front of it off completely and totally rebuild it, But our attitude and our sort of approach to it is to keep what we can there. Needs a lot of new timber, but keep what we can. And the further back, then the more that's happening. So a lot of the hull planking will probably stay. We would hope. Quite a bit of the deck planking even we'd be able to keep and keep on using. So that's the first thing. The second thing then is that, as often happens with these projects, you start off doing one thing, and then these sort of other things come up, and these sort of new opportunities come along. So the chance we had here was to do some work on the wharf. So we're not coming into an existing, it's almost like a blank space that we can both create the boatyard facilities that we need, but also use it imaginatively in as a community space, but it's sort of with a sort of an ethos of sustainability and sort of playing around with materials and of creating a space for people to do their own creation and activity and making, all of that type of stuff going on as well. So the way we're trying to sort of get that going is to capture people's imaginations by beginning some of that ourselves through reworking timbers which have come off Raybel or have come off other barges, making some wharfside furniture, some planters, you know, getting in some plants and sort of making it, sort of greening it a little bit, and some seating areas, and some sort of more storage sheds and spaces for people to work within. So all of that is got a reuse ethos going underneath it. I guess sort of drawing inspiration from things we've seen other places, in the project in Amsterdam, the Curvel project in the docks of Amsterdam is a sort of big inspiration for me. You know, places like the Black Country Museum, Blythe Tall Ships, you know, these sort of places which have got just sort of a bigger vision than just fixing up than just fixing up a barge. It's actually sort of thinking about the whole of the space and the potential of that space.
So with regards to, if you go back to the sort of sustainable shipping, like where do you see the future for sail cargo?
I think we can make it work. I really do. I think there was always, you know, you do run up against a little bit of a sort of thing of it being a demonstration of token cargo sort of idea. And yeah, I mean, I've spoken about it in those terms as well in the past of we're just sort of, you know, trying to again capture people's imaginations about what might be possible and asking questions and just using the movement and the arrival of things on a sailing ship to say, well, how does stuff normally get here? How long does it take? Where does it come from? How convenient, what is the cost of the convenience of having stuff in your supermarket whenever you want it, you know? Everything there 24 hours a day sort of thing. What's involved in all of that? And can we carry on like it, really? And it's almost, you can sort of reverse the question and you can say, well, can we make sail cargo work? But in a sort of way, it's the wrong question to the wrong people, because the right question to the right people is, how are you going to make container shipping work in a zero carbon world? And they don't really have a solution to that, actually. And so when you really think about that and you go further, there's sort of not really a future which isn't about wind propulsion, it isn't about sailing in a calmer, quieter, cleaner, zero carbon world, you know? So I think we're actually going with something which is a grain of change in a direction of change, which needs to happen and is going to happen. Now it will happen on different scales, and some of it will be sort of like, you know, maybe some of it will be the bigger container fleets will adapt how they work and how the propulsion works on their ships. But there's sort of space in there for us to create something which is a viable way of operating for the people who want to do it and the people who want to be involved. And some of it is just like, some of us have just got to do something, you know, and there's actually lots of us have to do that. And they could be sailors, they could be farmers, they could be traders, they could be just people, the way that people want to purchase and the things that they want to buy. And we all just want to do it and just feel a need to do it. And so we're supporting and helping each other by all being involved. Really. We can supplement what we do through the cross-ocean transport with stuff which is more local. We could take wheat grown in Kent into London bakeries. We could take beans and chickpeas, which are now being grown and harvested in Suffolk, into London. Maybe the stuff goes the other way as well, I don't know. So there's sort of like an added layers of complexity to the trade, which sort of like bring more people in and make it increasingly viable.
I think for me as well, which was really inspiring and involvement with the canals, which I'm obviously very familiar with living on a boat. And I think it's just that whole, how we can connect, you know, the oceans then to the estuaries, then to, you know, the canal and the kind of history, you know, that, you know, that's really related to that as well. So yeah, I'm really excited this year about the sort of prospect of us now, you know, connecting the canal network and then, you know, traveling transporting that cargo up through London.
Yeah, that's true. And you can also imagine that it's like a, sort of like a spider's web, really. It just growing over time as new things get opened up. So we've got the ship comes into Kent, and then we've got that London route and the canal network, but also there are people that would love to take stuff further up the east coast. So going from Essex and Suffolk and Norfolk, calling at different ports along that side of the country. And then even, there's inland waterways in Norfolk, so starting to use smaller craft to do some of those as well. We could go across, could go across to Amsterdam or Holland or Belgium. There's all sort of possibilities with this. As it gradually sort of incrementally, it gets bigger, then you sort of bring more people into it. And it's, there's just so much more. There's still so much more potential in to work with all of this.
And no, and again, even the idea of obviously relating that to the built environment and how we could possibly transport materials, especially like very carbon heavy materials such as bricks. Obviously we use a lot of reclaimed bricks within Salvo, and those kind of links to kind of Raybel and the kind of historical side of her sort of former purpose, I guess. So yeah, I mean, watch this space, especially when we're working with dealers within Kent and surrounding areas, and how we could then possibly link into those and sort of start, sailing material back into London as such, rather than using more conventional transport. So yeah, it's there's so many possibilities, I guess. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Gareth. It was really good to sort of have a catch up and obviously, yeah, just to kind of shed light on the project.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
See you.